Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Jobs, Economic Development, the Economy Committee, and it seems like we have quorum, so why don't we go ahead and call the roll.
Email Perez.
Here.
Here. Grove.
Here.
Here. Bell. Locke.
Here.
Here. Wessel.
Here.
Here. Morrell.
Here.
Thank you. We are waiting on our speaker. He has a bill to present, but in the meanwhile, I'd like to, is there a motion for the consent calendar to move?
I'll move the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Thank you. First by Mr. Ben Wessel, a second by Madam Vice Chair Sharon Groves. We need to call a roll on that as well. Can we call a roll, please?
For the consent calendar, AB 1114 and AB 1037.
Yes, it is.
Emanuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Grove.
Aye.
Aye. Bell. Locke.
Aye.
Aye. Wessel.
Aye.
Aye. Morrell.
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you. Do
They said that the next supposed to be 1 minute out. You could start the opening comments and they have to start your opening. It's a little disjointed, but. Oh, you could, yeah.
we'll wait another minute to see if our speaker is able to join us. If not, then Mr. Blumenfeld, you'll be up first. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Welcome to our Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. It's definitely a pleasure to have you here in our committee this morning.
Good to be here.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Speaker, if you could go ahead and present your bill, AB 29.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a first. Second, duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, AB 29 creates the Office of Economic Development within the Governor's Office and establishes its specific tasks and duties, including reorganizing such entities as the Small Business Advocate and CalBiz into the new office. The idea of AB 29 comes from the Little Hoover Commission's February 2010 report, which recommended the creation of a new governmental entity to fill the void left by the dismantled Technology, Trade, and Commerce Agency. With the dissolution of TTCA in 2003, the various programs that serve business in our states were in some cases dismantled, while other programs were reassigned to other state departments and agencies. This has led to a great deal of confusion amongst businesses in California because there is clearly no place for them to turn in state government for assistance. Reorganizing the need for creating a single portal for business, recognizing the need for creating a single portal for business, I introduced AB 2734 last year. Later that year, then Governor Schwarzenegger established GOED via an executive order that is still in effect, but their work is not codified. Establishing the Office of Economic Development within the Governor's office sends a clear message that elevates the role of business in California. Ultimately, the office will establish long-term economic goals and strategies as well as specific and effective services to California's businesses, both large and small. There's still significant work to be done to ensure that the office has the tools it needs to effectively serve businesses in California. I look forward to continuing discussions with the Governor's office and many interested stakeholders on this bill. As you're about to hear, there's tremendous support from the business and economic development communities, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that. Really appreciate the bill. Points well taken. Do you have anybody here in support?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Angie Wei on behalf of the California Labor Federation. We're in support of this measure. It's very similar to a bill that we sponsored last year. Shockingly for us, we learned that there were over 120 points of entry for business to engage with the state's bureaucracy to bring good jobs to California. We need a measure like this to be able to streamline that bureaucracy, to create a single point of entry for employers to come and find out the resources and the good job creation opportunities that the state can offer and provides, and we wholeheartedly support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of the measure? In support of the measure?
Jack, how are you?
I'm Jack Stewart, President of the California Manufacturers and Technology Association. I'd just like to, we support the bill. We'd like to see it amended a little bit, but we think this has the potential of being one of the most important bills in California in the last generation to get California back on track. I want to point out, yesterday Forbes magazine published a new study looking at all the statistical metropolitan areas, all the cities in the United States. Sure. And what they do is year to year look at each city on long-term, mid-term, and short-term job growth, and then rank them by highest potential. I went, being a kind of a wonk, last night spent a lot of time looking at these 398 cities and what happened over the last year since 2010. Collectively, California cities have slipped an accumulated 728 points in job growth potential. States like Michigan, who had at one time the worst unemployment in the country, actually went up 983. And I believe that's because they have a plan and they're working their plan. And that's what California is missing, Mr. Speaker, is a plan, and Mr. Chairman, is a plan to create jobs and to create an environment where employers can flourish in California. We have a slightly different twist on this. We would like to see this entity, government entity, and we think there has to be a government entity, part of the labor reorganization. Because one of the things I think that is missing here, and intentionally or not, is we have a lot of money and a lot of agencies work together on workforce training. And we think that economic development and workforce training should work together and be part of the same entity. So we would see a little different structure in government. I think that the direction is absolutely the right direction. But we'd like to see it. Our vision is a little different. We'd see part of a new department split by the labor agencies, with one set of labor being the enforcement and side of labor agency, and the other side being workforce development and workforce and economic development.
Sure, I appreciate your testimony. But for the record, you're in support of the measure.
We're in support, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I have copies of this if everybody. I'll give them to that.
Support of the measure?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, my name is Wayne Schell. I'm the President and CEO of the California Association for Local Economic Development. We represent over 900 organizations in California who live and breathe economic development every day. We are definitely in support of this bill. I'm not sure why we're not listed in support of it, but we told the staff a long time ago that we wanted to be in support of the bill. So, Mr. Speaker, maybe you can go back and make sure that we are appropriately listed in support of the bill. With respects to my good friend Jack's comments about turning this into a department, I've been there, we've done that. This has been going on for many, many years in California. We've had departments, we've had agencies, none have survived. And in my book, anything that we do with respects to going forward at the moment has to come from the governor's office. If it doesn't have the governor's tag tied to it, if we do a department, then we should have it tied to the governor's office somehow. Because without that authority, you can't call another agency or another department and say, look, you know, I'd like you to take care of this issue we have for this business. They'll just sort of say, well, fine, unless you're from the governor's office. Then it makes a big difference, and I think the staff would all attest to that if they could. This is the appropriate vehicle for the moment in time, and I think the Commission did a great job in analyzing that, so we should go forward with this bill, maybe with some fixing here and there along the line, but to a great extent, this bill is what should happen in California for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. In support of the measure?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Von Bork. I'm the chair of the Silicon Valley Economic Development Alliance. I'm joined today by our past chair, Kelly Klein, who's also the Economic Development Manager for the City of Cupertino, and Kara Gross, who's our Executive Director. We are here in support of AB 29. Our organization, the Silicon Valley Economic Development Alliance, basically spans 4 counties and includes up to 20 cities. We're a collaborative effort, and we have relied on GoEd in the past and would really see great value in that portion of the organization being out of the governor's office. Basically, I just want to share some points of success stories that we've had working with an economic development arm of the governor's, hopefully out of the governor's office, but here's our experience with GoEd thus
If you
far.
can do that in 1 minute or less. that'd be great.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
So they've assisted Silicon Valley EDA with providing information and insight into state regulations and resources, which is essential for us. They're an advocate, in particular with siting of headquarters for European solar manufacturing and clean tech companies. These are key for us to remain competitive globally. They provided assistance to IT companies that have considered relocating out of our area by educating them and providing information on resources that are available at the state level, and also understanding what those resources are, which is key for us. We don't have those resources, so it's helpful to have that connectivity with the state. We're very supportive of this bill. We feel that GoEd out of the governor's office can be an advocate for us, a liaison, a collaborative partner, and we're looking forward to that and hope you support this as well.
Thank you. Just for the record, there's been a motion and a second, and there is quite a bit of support, including the California Association of Enterprise Zones, CalAsia Chamber of Commerce, and CalEd as well. Any other members here in support?
Well, with that, Mr. Chair, Chris McKaylee on behalf of our client Lockheed Martin Corporation and the California Aerospace Technology Association, we supported Mr. Speaker's AB 2734 last year. Unfortunately, that was vetoed. We continue to support this effort as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yolanda Benson, representing the California Association of Enterprise Zones, as well as the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, representing the Asian Pacific Islander business community of California. We are here in support of the Speaker's bill, and we'll want to continue to work with him. Having worked in economic development, there's a lot of little places where economic development hides in almost every single department of the state. So I'm looking forward to getting an Office of Economic Development.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Anyone else here in support of the measure?
Crystal
State your name.
Mullenkamp, on behalf of Nana Solar, in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody here in opposition? Like to open it up for questions from members? Madam Vice Chair?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
I'm going to support the bill because putting Californians back to work through the private sector job creation should be our #1 priority in this legislature. However, I do have concerns that we're not addressing the underlying structural problems causing our high unemployment rate. California has one of the highest tax rates in the nation and one of the most hostile regulatory environments for business, private business in the nation. And so it has manipulated energy costs, resulting in high utility cost, and the prevailing wage issues that we face in the state result in high cost of all our public works projects. It's not a surprise that various business organizations consistently rate California as worst in the nation to do business. So I support this bill and your efforts to make this. When we went to Texas, they have a strong economic development department under Governor Perry, and it does work, and it is something that is really vital to the state. So thank you very much for putting forth this bill, but I really hope that we can work on the regulatory and the tax climate as well, because that is something that devastates business. California is a beautiful state. It's the promised land. It has an opportunity just to be drawn because of its climate and our coastal region and all of our stuff. We can be drawn to this place. And people want to do business here, but it's such a hostile business climate they can't do business here. So I'd hope that you would help work on that because you have the power to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Any other members' comments or questions? Well, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say thank you for bringing this bill forward. A very important bill. Over the course of my tenure here as the chair of jobs, not only did I hear about the concerns of regulation and the concerns of taxes, but we also have heard about the concerns of streamlining and the fact that many businesses don't know where to go. And the fact that if we are able to do this with the governor's support, the governor at the helm of it all, definitely is going to elevate us to a whole other level so that we can continue to compete in the global economy. And so with that, I'd like to, this bill is due pass, and there's a first and a second. And if we can go ahead and call the roll.
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
I. Grove. I. Bell. I. Block. I. Wessel. I. Morrell. Aye. 6-0.
Speaker, thank you.
Thank you.
Your bill is out. We could go ahead and start with Mr. Blumenfield. Let me see here. Let me take a look here. And Mr. Blumenfield, if you could, let's start with your bill, AB 700, if that's all right.
Sure, however you want to do it. I have my bill, and I'm also prepared to do the Speaker's other bill.
Sure. So members, next on the agenda, we're going to hear 4 bills related to the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. These bills are a follow-up to the committee's March 30th hearing that we had. At the hearing, we heard from the iBank Director, Economic Development Groups, and Labor. And over the course of the hearing, members and witnesses made a variety of recommendations, some relating to more information than others. All of these recommendations have been summarized and included in a section on recommended follow-up action, which begins on page 31 of your booklet, if you happen to have that, and more specific program level changes, which are included in Appendix K on page 112. Now, if you turn to page 31, you'll find out that our committee's follow-up actions, which fall into 4 areas. Sponsoring additional stakeholder engagement is 1. Working on a framework for a new infrastructure plan and financing process is 2. Developing mechanisms for enhancing local technical assistance for rural and small cities, and obtaining additional information on federal, state, and local infrastructure, finance, and development activities. Now, guiding this work is a principle that healthy economies have infrastructures that support the economy and help businesses and investors get to the next level. California faces many challenges in a post-recession economy, the poor quality of our infrastructure being one of the most prominent. How can we expect to compete in the global marketplace with an infrastructure system that was designed and substantially built in the mid-20th century? In trying to address these challenges, we can turn to page 112, where you will see a preliminary list of program-level recommendations from the March 30th hearing. The recommended program changes are divided into 5 areas: administrative structure, technical assistance, innovation and best practices, expansion of program authority, and programs to relocate. At today's hearing, we're going to move forward on many of these recommendations. First up, we'll have Mr. Blumenfield, who will be presenting AB 700, and then he'll go ahead and move on to present our Speaker's bill, AB 1096. But following Mr. Blumenfield, we'll hear from Mr. Wessel, AB 696, and then as well, my measure, AB 893. And the amendments that are set for the Jetty Infrastructure Bank are in a package, just in case you need this. We have copies for you as well. So with that being said, Mr. Blumenfield, you may begin your presentation. Thank you. Duly noted. There's a first and a second. But Bob, we'd like to hear your presentation.
All right, thank you. And I want to also thank you for including me in the oversight hearing that you held here. As you know, you and I have talked a lot about infrastructure bank and jobs issues over the last couple of years, and I was really grateful to be part of that hearing. I found it very informative, and it really helped in our discussions on amending the bill that I had,
Sure.
Working with you to create all these good amendments to the bill that have now made it an even stronger bill, and not just a strong bill in and of itself, but as you were saying, part of an important package of bills. So I'm proud to be before you today and talk about AB 700, which is a fairly simple but important bill. What it does is it removes the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, or the iBank, from the Business Transportation and Housing Agency and establishes it as an independent agency. It would also designate the director of the State Department of Finance as the chair of the iBank Governing Board. Also, as you were referring to, I'm taking amendments that are in the analysis that do the following. 1, require the iBank to establish a process for setting 2-year program goals consistent with our state environmental goals and policy. 2nd, to require the iBank to adopt an annual work plan to drive the iBank's activities. 3rd, to authorize the iBank to serve as a facilitator of regionally significant infrastructure development projects. One very important in my area. Fourth, change the title of the executive director to chief executive officer and require the iBank to link with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and other state sites developed for business assistance. And finally, the amendments authorize the iBank to enter into administrative contracts with other state entities for prudent and sound management of the bank. It's my goal that as the iBank moves out of the BTH and we streamline its administrative functions, that these provisions will provide the iBank with guidance and ensure accountability. California is one of the largest and most diverse economies in the world, with a state GDP of over $1.9 trillion in 2009. At the same time, California faces severe budgetary pressures and a sizable infrastructure shortfall. Due to this, we need to look at every financing tool at our disposal to help rebuild the state's crumbling infrastructure, which really was put in place more than 40 years ago under the previous Browns administration, or the father of our current Browns administration. I mean, that's how long this goes. Yes, Papa Brown. But as a tax-exempt conduit bond issuer on behalf of governmental, nonprofit, and business entities, the iBank has the expertise to take on an important role in effectively financing targeted investments that will support important state infrastructure projects, as well as California's other top priorities. At the same time, functioning under the BTH, the iBank is often restricted by duplicative and unnecessary administrative policies that often negatively impact the iBank's ability to carry out its primary program functions. By changing the organizational structure of the bank, this bill will enable the iBank to become more efficient and effective as a financing authority and to work more closely with the Governor's Office. And ultimately, that will ensure the iBank can react swiftly to changing economic conditions, and finally, would allow for both responsiveness and accountability. In addition, it's important to realize that President Obama and members of Congress have recently taken steps to advance the National Infrastructure Bank to help the states fund infrastructure projects through loan guarantees and other innovative mechanisms. The time is right for California's iBank to position itself to leverage its resources and these federal infrastructure dollars. AB 700 is an important step in getting us there. There is no opposition registered that I know of to this bill, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Blumenfield. Appreciate your points. Are there any members here, folks here, in behalf of the measure, in support of the measure? Mr. Winchell?
Yes, Mr. CalEd supports this bill, period.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of the measure? Anybody in opposition of the measure? I'd like to open it up to members for questions, thoughts. Yes, Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Blumenfeld, I just have a question. This iBank, the way I understand it, is supposed to be for loans for infrastructure, housing, business, to help economic growth. Why is it that we would take it away from the Business Transportation and Housing Agency? That doesn't make sense if it's for those agencies and the production of not the agencies, but the things that they extend out to the public.
Well, so we're elevating it. It's not that we're taking it away. It needs to have the direct connection with the Governor's Office. It needs to have a higher profile and more agility to move, to get it out from under that structure and give it the flexibility that it needs to really function properly.
And to move it under the Governor's Office is going to make that happen?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sir, would you mind explaining how it would make it more functional? What do you see as some of the key steps to make it more efficient and functional over what it is now by moving it? Thanks.
Well, it's a lot of things that, I outlined in terms of, some of the specifics about we're setting the goals and all of those things that we mentioned, requiring them to adopt annual work plans, making the executive director the CEO, requiring them to work on the regional plans. And you could say all those things could be done under the BTH. But sort of historically, we found that under the BTH, they end up with just all this duplicative paperwork. And the BTH has a number of other agendas. And we're trying to elevate the iBank agenda so that it can also work in better coordination with the Federal Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that we fix all the duplicity at the BTH so that we don't have those problems as well, but in another bill, I guess.
I'm happy to work with you on streamlining regulations across the board and in BTH.
I still don't, I understand that you just tried to explain it again, but I still don't understand, and I'm not trying to be difficult, about how making this not part of BTH, but making it part of this other authority will make it better.
Perhaps we have someone from the head of the iBank can talk about some of the...
Mr. Shell, maybe you have some thoughts as well on this point.
Can talk directly about some of the issues about being under BTH that make it difficult. I know that you are here for technical answers, but we've talked a lot about all of the issues there, and if you could share that with the group, that would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a number of things that come with being a program within an agency. iBank's currently not even a department. It's a program within an agency, so it's really run by the agency with some the board has limited authority to approve projects and some outside contracts, but the bank budget is developed independently by the agency without, or this is historically developed by the agency without input from the iBank. There's no link to the governor's office. I met Governor Schwarzenegger once in a restaurant in the last 7 years, but that's about the contact that I had. We don't have control. We don't have control over our budget. We don't have control over hiring our staff. And one thing that we've been working very diligently on the last several months is discussions with large outside nonprofits as sources of money for some new programs. And one of the preconditions that they have is that there be some indication that this entity is separate enough so that the money that they put in will be used for the purpose that it's given.
Mr. Shell, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I think Stan did a good job of laying out some of the concerns we've had over the years. The bank has just been, quite frankly, not able to function like it should. When we created this institution many, many years ago, as some of you heard in my testimony the last time, it was created to be a development corporation. It wasn't a bank. The term bank got mixed in here somehow, and I think that tends to confuse people a little bit about it's not a depository place. It's a place to do business. It's a place to interact with the private sector. It's a place where you can bring public and private opportunity to the table, but it has to act quickly. It has to act in the environment we're in today, which is you got a deal going, you better get it done quick. You can't wait around for a whole lot of bureaucracy to decide whether this is a good deal or not, especially when it's already been decided somewhere else. So what this bank was fashioned after was the Massachusetts Development Corporation. It's called MassDev. Okay? You can go online. It's a sophisticated organization that can get out there and do deals. It can work in rural communities where rural communities need help a lot. It can help urban areas with their projects and problems. It just needs to be flexible and able to operate and act in an environment of moving quickly because, you know, the economy doesn't wait around for people to figure out whether they're going to fund a project or not. And we need creative finance. It's a place to establish creative finance. It's a place where people can come together to talk about, where the bank can pull the best minds in the state together to say, how do we solve a particular problem related to infrastructure and or just doing good projects in California. Considering where we're headed with redevelopment, which is a darn shame, we need to have more of these kinds of this kind of thinking going on to solidify the ability of local economic development people to actually do their job in a meaningful way. So these amendments are really really very good amendments in terms of I think creating a sophisticated institution that can help support job development in California.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shell. Hopefully that helps with your question, Madam Vice Chair. Any other questions or thoughts from members? I just want to say thank you for bringing this forth, Mr. Blumenfield, as well, for participating in our discussion that we had on the iBank last go-around. Obviously, there is a synchronization here that we're trying to do, and we are trying to move forward a package that makes sense for the state of California. And so with that being said, there was a motion and a second, and this is due pass with amendments. And if, Madam Secretary, can we call the roll?
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Grove.
I'm going to lay off. I'm not going to vote no. I was intending to vote no, but based on the information that you provided today, I'm going to just lay off and watch the amendments take place, because I think that with the bureaucracy that we have in state government, we've got to eliminate that. And I think that if this goes forward, and you should be able to, go with where the economic situation is now and make a decision and not have to go through layers and layers and layers of government to try to make something happen. And I'm all for that. I just haven't had an analysis on the amendments, so I just want to watch and see what happens there. But I'm not going to vote no, so sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Bell? Aye. Block? Aye. Wessel? Aye. Morale?
Agree with Shannon, but I'm going to go ahead and say aye on this one.
Aye. 5-0.
Good job, Mr. Blumenfeld. Your bill is out. Thank you. Now, if we could just go ahead and move on to item 4, AB 1094, by our speaker, will be presented by Mr. Blumenfeld as well.
Okay, thank you. Chair members, on behalf of the Speaker accepts the committee's 2 suggested amendments. The first one was to make technical and clarifying changes, and the second was to designate the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank as the lead agency for applying for and receiving federal infrastructure bank program monies. What this bill does is it provides an opportunity for the legislative branch to participate in critical decisions affecting the iBank by expanding the membership of its board of directors from 5 to 7 members. Of the 2 additional members, one will be appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly and the other by the Senate Rules Committee. The 2 new members will serve as non-voting members. The iBank plays an integral public finance role in delivering infrastructure projects throughout the state. It issues tax-exempt and taxable revenue bonds, provides financing to public agencies, and leverages state and federal funds to build such necessary capital projects as water treatment facilities and roads. There's no known opposition to this bill. I respectfully request your aye vote.
There's a first. There's a second. Anybody here in support of the measure?
Mr. Chair, again, we'd like to go on record in support of this bill for the California Association for Local Economic Development, CalEd. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you, Ms. Shell. Anyone else? Anybody in opposition? Any questions or comments from members?
Sorry, Mr. Blumenfeld. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Vice Chair.
We already have the ability to seek advice, is what we're looking for advice from Assembly members or Senate members. Do you think that there would be a conflict or something that if people were able to be on the board that were sitting members of the Assembly or the Senate, that they might try to direct funds to their districts?
There's a long precedent of having members on these type of boards. I'm glancing through to look at some of the Waste Management Board. We have appointments. The Employment Training Panel, the Workforce Infrastructure Board. Speaker has 2 appointments. California Small Business Board, just to name a few. So this is not a novel idea. What we found is, we are one branch of government, and I always refer to us as the People's House. We're the most responsive to the people. So I think it's only good to have, these are non-voting members, but to have membership from the Assembly and the Senate on these types of boards, and this board in particular, so that we can better coordinate and cooperate with the kind of work that they do, because they can't often operate in a vacuum. They often need the legislature to back them up on kinds of things. And so it helps with the communication so that there's not miscommunications. So in my view, it's only positive.
Can you seek advice from members without them being on the board? Is that possible?
It's possible. This is a fairly painless way to create a formal structure to get that advice. They're non-voting members on this board, and that way we have a regular presence.
There is some history to your questions as well, Madam Vice Chair. If Tony, if you can go ahead and provide some of that history for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in your analysis on page 3, we prepared a chart, just as Mr. Blumenfeld said. Not only is there a history within a number of the economic development area, but also in testimony that we've received at previous hearings, the issue of trying to go on an ongoing dialogue between the members of the legislature and the administration on economic development issues in real time seemed to be most appropriate. aside from what you have in the analysis that we've charted, but also international trade. Our trade agreement, our strategy is actually reviewed by the legislature with the administration, as well as having direct members participating in the development on the administration side.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions or thoughts from members? Well, thank you for presenting this bill, Mr. Blumenfeld, on behalf of our speaker. This is due pass with amendments. There is a first and a second. And if we can go ahead and call the roll.
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Grove. No. Bell. Aye. Block. Aye. Wessel. Aye.
4-1. Bill is out. Thank you, Mr. Blumenfeld.
Thank you, members.
And we're going to hold the roll open for Mr. Morale on that bill, Madam Secretary. And if we could go ahead and continue with our iBank and AB 696, Mr. Wessel, would you like to present?
Also, the iBank has brought in the requested information from our hearing, and that's what the members have in the packet.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'd like to begin by stating that I'd like to accept the proposed amendments to AB 696. And simply what this bill does is it requires that projects selected for funding under the Infrastructure Bank State Revolving Loan Fund would be funded if the project meets a specified land use and economic development criteria. Specifically, the bill would add a new eligibility threshold for the ISRF applications and define the economic development to mean that each project would provide some quantitative level of economic benefit, such as the creating or retention of job, growth in the property tax base, or growth in the sales tax base. Simply stated, we're prioritizing these loans to go to those projects that create jobs, that create a better economy for our state. We have a very small amount of money in the iBank. I wish there were more money, but we need to prioritize the selection of the qualified applicants as those that meet the highest threshold of creating jobs and economic development activity in our state. So I ask for an aye vote from the committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Wessel. Is there anyone here in support of the measure? There's a first. There's a second. Anyone in opposition? Any questions or thoughts from members? Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the only one on the other side. I have to ask questions. I'm sorry. How do you anticipate paying for these land use people that will, this bill has some land use experts that will be on the board, right? Or not?
No. No.
No? Okay. I'm sorry, I have notes from a previous bill. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay. Okay, so then my question, I guess, is that you made a statement in your presentation that it prioritizes applicants for the highest threshold of jobs. In your opinion or intent, does that have anything to do with PLA agreements or labor jobs?
No, also, no.
No labor jobs?
No.
So it's not,
Well,
it's not the intent to give a priority. It's not an intent of yours or this bill or the iBank that it gives an intent to jobs that are under a collective bargaining agreement. That is not a priority of this.
It's nowhere in the language. It's not even a specific direction to the iBank to do that. No, not at all. But it doesn't preclude a project that may have that. It doesn't necessarily call it out. Simply, whoever the applicant may be, if they make a strong case that this project creates jobs, and they have to back that up with empirical data, that's going to be the overarching guide for the staff to follow and establish the ranking of each project. So it's about job creation, and we're not necessarily looking at what specific type of job creation, but we're looking at those projects that do the best job at, and it's an overall its overall analysis. I mean, the project's going to come in and make its own. I can see that if a project comes in and says that it creates sales tax revenue and that it creates jobs, and if there's a project that does everything, but if there's a specific project that creates quality jobs, I think we'd all want to see on the legislature, all want to see our constituents have quality jobs. So
Quality jobs meaning union jobs.
quality jobs meaning good paying jobs, whatever that may be.
Okay, so the bill doesn't give any benefit to any labor or under a collective bargaining agreement.
I encourage you to take another look at it because it doesn't have any language.
Just trying
That's
to
very
relate it to the
specific.
beginning of the first bills that we send the iBank and where I think it's going, and it's all the bills seem to connect somehow to labor. So I was just trying to get that on record to see if that was something that was your intent.
Yeah, Madam Vice Chair, no, there's no language at all whatsoever in this bill that related to PLAs or to labor. That is not to say, though, that if a business wants to have a PLA or have a union, that would be up to them. But in the criteria for scoring projects, for example, on page 4 of the analysis,
yes,
it provides you how the points are spread across different criteria. Nothing in here has any linkage whatsoever to PLAs or to union. So I think the points that our Assembly member, Mr. Wessel, made are points in which ultimately the purpose behind this piece of legislation really is to create jobs and create them locally, right? And the hope is that through this process we can get there.
And I appreciate that. And I did read that, and I saw the scoring process, and I do understand how it's scored. I just think that there's something, I'm looking at what I think, how they're all connected, trying to put all the bills together and trying to figure out how they're connected through labor. So with the first iBank bill where they got consideration, and we worked on an amendment to try to limit that consideration. Mm-hmm. So I just appreciate that. And then there was a similar measure last session that was referenced to state cost, roughly about $500,000 continuing cost. Is there any way that we're going to be able to reduce that cost, or do you anticipate it costing that much?
I don't see that there's necessarily a direct cost of establishing this criteria. I think it allows staff to look at applications differently, and it allows them to communicate to the applicant what criteria they're specifically looking for. So it provides guidance to the staff and to the applicant how to present their applicant and how to select funding.
But if the iBank right now does not have land experts, and you said it didn't have anything to do with land experts, but it's planning expertise to determine whether, proposed project to meet land use criteria. So in my mind, you can't just have somebody that doesn't know anything about land to access these applications or to approve or not approve these applications if they don't have any land use experience. Do you anticipate those land use experts volunteering for the iBank?
No, I think the iBank, I'm very confident that they'll be able to work out issues of staffing and issues of qualifying and preparing staff to look for the kind of criteria that this bill establishes. So
how will that be paid for?
The same way we're paying for staff now. Same way. It's all a matter of providing administrative support. Doesn't necessarily have a cost, and I'm sure that the bank through an administrative process can root all these details out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Bell?
Well, as a planner, a long time ago at least, before I became a public official, elected official, I was a planner. I'm interested in the land use criteria and understand that the planning criteria is based on the Environmental Goals and Policy Report, which was last updated in 2003. And it requires a 4-year cycle of updates, like every 4 years. And we've had a lot of legislation regarding land use in planning since that time, such as SB 375, there's been AB 32, there's been a lot of economic changes in California since that time. And it requires the governor to update this plan. That his responsibility under the law, current law, is for the governor to propose updating this plan. So I think that I like the idea of land use criteria as part of this process and the point system. But I wanted to say I think we need to really request the governor commence upgrading the plan, the environmental goals and policy report, so that we can have a current document. It's not like right now it's 10 year. It's essentially a 10-year-old document. It needs to be updated. And do you have any thoughts on that? Have you looked into that issue? Or?
Absolutely, and this is consistent with the Blumenfield bill that would incorporate language that accomplishes that. So, it's an iterative process. Every county is working to create their goals. And I know in San Diego, we're probably leading the state in terms of incorporating those state policies into our land use overarching guiding principles. So as the counties move forward and adopt those plans, those will serve as the guidelines. They will provide documentation that the staff could review and analyze to make sure that the projects are consistent with those programs. So, I don't think it's necessarily rocket science. I think that there will be a lot of supporting information at the local level that's incorporated into these applications. I think we just have to coordinate all of our activity. We have to align our state policies and principles at with the local goals, and as they develop their goals that meet the state criteria, those are going to come together and work together with how we're actually prioritizing very limited resources to achieve those goals at the local level. So we're using that not only to create jobs but also to be consistent with our land use principles, with our economic development principles, with our goals at job creation and even housing. I mean, I can see how housing could be integrated in every which way of this. I mean, we're looking at some of the most successful states at kind of meeting at their employment goals, where they have low unemployment. One of the characteristics that they all share in common is a low cost of housing. So as we pursue our goals, we will try to achieve an environment where housing is affordable, where we have good paying jobs, where we have a diversified economy, where we're meeting our environmental goals as well, because of course people want to visit places that are attractive and nice, and it's important for tourism, it's important for the economy. So it all comes together. To answer your question quite briefly.
In the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have 9 counties. And what's happening is the 9-county Bay Area is completing a regional plan for the region. And because the Bay Area is sort of all interconnected, so we have a regional plan that accomplishes a sustainable community goal, long range, including a transportation, housing, environmental quality, all those social issues. And it will identify areas of need in that plan in terms of economic need.
Sure.
And we'll be able to have that. And they're having extensive public participation in that development of those regional plans. And but I think the governor, we got to get the governor to get up to speed on this.
Sure.
And,
Well, Mr. Bell,
something maybe we can urge the governor to start working on.
Most definitely, and we mentioned earlier this is a package of bills that deal with the iBank, and in AB 893, the bill that's coming up next will call for an update of the EGPR from the governor, and so that's actually the hope that we get to, that we actually require the governor to update the plan. Any other thoughts or questions from members? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. you threw me for a little bit of a loop because when I asked you about land use, you said it had nothing to do with the bill, and I thought, well, I must be reading the wrong bill, but I wasn't. In your bill, it specifically says this bill would require a project selected to receive assistance from the bank to additionally have economic development benefits and meet land use criteria. So I thought I had made an error on my notes, but it is specifically this bill. So back to my question, with an estimated $500,000 cost in consulting fees with a previous bill that was similar to this, how does the iBank intend to pay for land use experts? Or are they not going to have experts on land use to administer
But I
these
just, I just want to
applications?
correct you. I didn't say you read a different bill. You said you read another
No.
bill. So
When I asked you about land use, I asked you if there's land use in this bill, and you said no, there's not. And I
well,
said, oh, I
no,
must have
that's
looked
not
at
what
it.
you asked. You asked if my bill required that staff be land use experts, and I said there's nothing in my bill that requires that. This bill doesn't require the infrastructure bank to hire any additional people or necessarily put an emphasis on any one kind of program. This is requiring that they have people that are able to administer a program that has certain criteria that establishes what projects get funded. Now,
Meet land use criteria.
you know, on land use, when I say land use criteria, I'm talking about the state's overarching guiding principles on land use, and we have specific goals that we support, laws that we pass on to the counties and the local level that guide them in their decisions in terms of how to approve land use. So it's we kind of had a discussion with Assemblymember Bell talking about how to achieve those goals in working in partnership with all the different departments and agencies. It's important that we incorporate language to make sure that those issues are not overlooked in the process of allocating very scarce resources. So it's more of an intent to make sure that we comply with the state's goals and our policies, and that's the only thing this bill does.
And the costs are not associated, to my understanding, to the general fund.
That's right.
They're associated to fees. They're associated to maybe interest earned, right, to help pay for staff or the actual program itself. So,
and in
doesn't
either
come from the general
way,
fund at all.
there's a cost of administering this program under just the normal guidelines. So it wouldn't necessarily change drastically. We haven't really identified a fiscal impact, and we'll see if one is identified through appropriations. But we'll go through that process and working with iBank staff and appropriations staff.
Okay, because that was my concern in the first part of your bill, where it says that the bank establishes criteria, priorities, and guidelines for the selection of projects to receive assistance from the bank, meaning loans, correct?
That's right.
So, and then in the next, with specified factors, and it says the bill would require the project selected to receive assistance from the bank to additionally have economic development benefits to meet land use criteria.
That's right.
So if the bank is assisting in meeting land use criteria for loans, I was just curious who would administer I mean, obviously, I would think that you would need somebody with some type of land use expertise, but maybe you don't think so?
Not necessarily. Not
Okay,
necessarily.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members or thoughts?
Oh, just
Mr. Bell?
that the governor and the Office of Planning Research is where you have also some people that are having land use planning expertise in the administration, and I think they could help us. They obviously are the people that are going to be called on to work on land use criteria. In addition, I think land use is more or less in California a local or regional decision process, so they'll rely on locals to come up with some ideas on that as well, because in California most of the land use planning is done at the local level. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. You wish to close, Mr. Wessel?
Simply stated, again, aligning this is basically a bill that will focus on creating jobs using our very scarce resources to make it a priority to create jobs in our state. So I hope I can count on your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wessel.
humbly request an aye vote.
This bill is a due pass. There's a first, with amendments, there's a first and a second.
V. Manuel
Madam
Perez.
Speaker, go ahead.
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Grove. No. Bell. Aye. Block. Wessel.
Aye.
Aye. Morrell. No. That's 3-2. Bill is on call.
Bill's on call. Mr. Wessel? Let me see here. Mm-hmm. This is done.
This is consent.
That was done too. Okay. Madam Vice Chair, if you can go ahead and chair the meeting, I'm going to go ahead and present my bill.
Okay. I'm not trying to correct you because you know that Mr. Weezer had a good bill.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed that you have two bills. Will you be taking up 893 right now?
I will be taking up, let me take a quick look. Yes, I will be.
Okay, great. Thank you. I understand we're going to do all the iBank bills together. So AB 893.
That's right.
Go ahead and present your bill, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair and members, in our current economic climate, it is critical that the state make the most of the tools that has support economic recovery and local job creation. One such tool is the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. Utilized to its potential, the iBank can be a critical partner in financing and leveraging millions of dollars for job creation and infrastructure investments throughout the state of California. Doing so without relying on general fund dollars. This bill, AB 893, helps California to make more effective use of the iBank. AB 893 modernizes the operations of the iBank, making it more relevant and inclusive of those involved in economic development. First, it more closely involves the economic development community in iBank decision-making. Second, it requires the iBank to conduct outreach and technical assistance to small and rural communities. And third, it adds new reporting requirements about the number of jobs created and retained and industries served. This bill will help bring the iBank up to date and help to maximize its potential to serve communities throughout California. With me today is Mr. Hazel Roth, Executive Director of the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
We have a motion to move the bill in a second. Thank you. I don't know if this is the appropriate time before you testify, but Mr. Chair, you were also going to have amendments, right? The committee amendments.
Yes. Proposed amendments include, you'd like for me to read all nine? There's 9 of them.
Sorry.
Remove the legislative representatives and appointees from the iBank board, as this issue is being addressed in another bill. Expand governor's appointments to include a representative from labor and an economic development professional appointed by the governor. Remove the requirement that a certain number of iBank employees undertake technical assistance activities and clarify that federal, state, and local entities may contract with technical assistance. Establish MOUs with related infrastructure financing programs to expedite the joint use of funds. Authorize the iBank to contract with state entities to underwrite or otherwise offer assistance in implementing other state agencies' programs for the purpose of maximizing leverage of state and local funds. Codifying the state and federal California Finance Coordinating Committee. Authorize pre-development loans from ISRF. And authorize the establishment of a letter of credit guarantee program. And finally, authorize tribal nations as eligible applicants for iBank programs under terms and conditions defined by the iBank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Now your support members, I apologize, sir.
No problem. Sure. You'd like to present?
Stan Hazelroth from the California Infrastructure Bank. I'm here today in order to respond to technical questions or anything like that. I'm not authorized to take a position yet, as the governor hasn't had the opportunity to review and take a position.
Other members in support?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I'd like to thank the committee for the terrific hearing we had a couple months ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, on this infrastructure bank. It was a very good back and forth. We're in support of this bill, particularly the provision that expands the board, adds a labor seat to that board. We feel like the men and women who are actually doing the work that the infrastructure bank funds should perhaps have a voice on the board to figure out, to lend their expertise about projects and to figure out which projects are best to approve and help the board move forward. So we're happy to be here in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, are there any comments from the other members of the committee? Mr. Chair, would you like to close?
This is once again a package of bills related to the iBank. Many of these thoughts, ideas came from folks that are working with the business community on an ongoing basis. Mr. Wayne Shell, quite frankly, did an excellent job, in my opinion, of laying out quite a bit of great ideas that we should take on, and as well as Mr. Hazeroth with his testimony. Our intent really at the end of the day is to try to support our state economically by ensuring that we refine and progress and advance the iBank. So with that, I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I just want to ask one question. I apologize for not doing it earlier. A seat is guaranteed for labor, and then another seat is guaranteed. What was the title of that seat again?
Economic Development Professional.
And would that include someone from a small business?
It could.
It could. Is there a seat available for a small business owner that is not labor, that could represent the sides of someone who is not in the labor market?
Well, there would be a seat for an individual that is from labor, that in other words is a worker, and then a seat from an individual that's from the business community.
Okay. An economic
So that could be a small business person, that could be the owner of a manufacturing plant, per se, but definitely an individual that is that has a business, right? That's how they earn their living, right? And that they have folks hired.
Under the title of economic professional.
Under the title of, so a representative from the business community, and yes, the title would be economic development professional.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll call the roll. Ms. Mercedes?
Chairman
Tony,
Perez?
I apologize.
Aye.
Vice Chair Grove?
I'm not voting.
Mr. Bell? Aye. Bell? Mr. Block? Mr. Wesso? Aye. Mr. Wesso? Mr. Morrell? 3 to 1. The bill's out.
3 to 1, Mr. Chair, your bill's out.
Thank you.
They're going to keep the roll open
Yeah, we'll
for
keep the roll.
other
I think
votes.
we're missing one more vote.
Thank you. Oh. The bill is on call. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
Can I go ahead and present item number 6?
Mr. Chair, at your pleasure, you may introduce item number 6.
Thank you, sir. Item number 6 is AB 1137, which is economic development, foreign trade, and investment.
What'd you say?
AB 1137 facilitates local economic development and job creation by assisting small business to access new export markets for their goods and services, updating the law relating to free trade zones, and authorizing the use of the new federal funds under the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. International trade is a very important component of California's $1.9 trillion economy. If California were a country, it would be the 11th largest exporter in the world. Last October, as part of the Small Business Jobs Act, Congress passed and the President signed the State Trade and Export Promotion Grant Program. The program, more commonly called the STEP program, makes up to $90 million in competitive grants available to states over the next 3 years. California is currently in the process of applying for part of the $30 million, which becomes available in federal fiscal year 2011. The STEP pilot grant initiative is aimed at achieving 2 goals. increase the number of small businesses that want to export, and increase the value of exports for those small businesses that currently are exporting. It is important that California have a framework for implementing and overseeing these monies. AB 1137 provides such a framework and helps California in applying for the next round of funding. I have with me today Mr. Tom Freeman, Commissioner with the Office of Foreign Trade with the Riverside County Economic Development Authority. The Riverside County Economic Development Authority, along with the Jetty Committee, are the sponsors of this bill. I respectfully ask for a aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Motion to move the bill in a second.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Tom Freeman. I'm the Foreign Trade Commissioner for the County of Riverside, and we're very pleased on behalf of the Board of Supervisors to support this bill. Foreign trade, as the chairman indicated, is extremely important to California. In the county in which the Assemblyman represents, $11.5 billion a year exits our ports. It employs 10% of our entire workforce, and these tools are desperately needed by local business. I can't tell you how many times I have people coming in looking for financing and assistance. And I also represent the EXIM Bank of the United States as the representative for them, and this is something EXIM looks forward to in partnership and having another tool to get money to businesses. So that concludes my testimony, and I certainly hope that you'll support this bill.
Thank you. Any other members in support?
I think my letter got in late. The California's Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce in support of this bill. For our businesses, it's very, very important for us to have all the tools available for us so that we can do export. That's part of growing our business. So we appreciate the leadership and continue to work with the author. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals in support? Any members in opposition? Any comments from the committee? Mr. Bell?
Of course, Silicon Valley is very interested in this legislation because of all the counties in the United States, over the last 30 years, we've been one of the top 3 exporting counties in the United States. And we feel that California state government has been sleeping on their foreign trade issues over the last 7 or 8 years. We need to waken up California and be very aggressive in terms of encouraging exports and helping businesses that export goods. So we applaud this legislation and look forward to having an increased level of exports in the state of California, which is a key driver in our economy in Silicon Valley and the state of California.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Russo, do you have a question? I'm going to support the bill because I think it's good that California take advantage of monies that are coming down from the federal government. However, I don't support that the federal government continue to spend money that they don't have. But I think that if they are going to release funds, that California should be able to get our fair share. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Yeah, sure.
Madam Vice Chairman, Tom Freeman, Foreign
Yes,
Trade Commissioner. I'd like to speak to that issue because I think
Absolutely.
there's one misconception, particularly as it goes to foreign lending, and that is that through programs like the EXIM Bank, chartered back in the Roosevelt administration, we are producing millions in dollars of revenue and returning it to the general fund. And this comes from our loan programs to your businesses. The fees that they pay help run a staff of only 400 people nationwide, but we're loaning billions of dollars in business. We just loaned $3 billion to Brazil. Why do we give a line of credit to Brazil? Simply to create jobs here in the United States. They have a international soccer match coming up in Special Olympics. We're seeking to get Brazil integrated with California businesses. And one of the ways we do that is extending credit. And in this particular case, the money that's paid by the businesses that are borrowing will repay and replenish the funds. So there is no specific hit to general fund monies, and I think that's an important distinction. This is not the typical federal program we see. This actually generates revenue and helps sustain itself and is used by businesses across California. And the more people know about it, we hope to see more people using it.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that very much. Mercedes?
V. Manuel Perez.
Aye.
I. Grove.
Aye.
I. Bell. I. Block. Wessel. I. Morel. Aye. 5-0. Bill is out.
Your bill is out, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Vice Chair and members, I have another bill. Rather than going back and forth, if I can present this bill, and then we can go ahead and move on with Mr. Wessel's bill.
And that would be AB 901?
That's right, Madam Vice Chair.
At your pleasure again,
Okay?
Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. Is that okay with Mr. Wessel? Can we do that? Thank you. AB 901, implementation of the Federal and State Small Business Jobs Act, basically updates terms and makes clarifications to assist the successful implementation of the Federal and State Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. The Federal Small Business Jobs Act provides $168 million in new dollars for California small businesses. Some of these funds will be administered through federal agencies, such as the Small Business Administration, while others will be awarded and implemented through existing state programs such as the Capital Access Loan Program. Collectively, these programs offer unique new financing and technical assistance opportunities to California's small businesses. AB 901 helps to ensure there are no technical hurdles that impede the successful delivery of these funds. In addition, the bill adds accountability provisions related to how the funds are used by specifying that the programmatic reports include the total number of businesses served, jobs created, jobs retained, the geographic distribution of the loans, and the types of businesses served. This bill was heard in Banking and Finance Committee on April 25th and passed with a 12-0 vote, bipartisan support. And I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Chair, we were just handing an amendment, the proposed amendments, amendment number A, or letter A, exempt nonprofit small business lenders from California lending licensure. That amendment is for, can you explain that?
I'm going to go ahead and have my staff explain that for you,
Great,
please.
thank you.
This was a request made from Small Business Financial Institution, and what it does, it exempts CDFIs from having to
Tony?
having to have licensure.
Tony, would you like to clarify some of that?
Yes, this is a request actually from CDC Small Business down in San Diego, and what they noted was there were a number of exemptions from these licensure requirements. This request was made when the bill was in Assembly Banking. This is a double referral. You'll see in the mock-up that there's a number of entities that have an exemption, and so this is on the very back. And so this places these nonprofit, federally exempt corporations who are already covered by the federal SBA, that they won't have essentially a double level of regulations.
Okay.
So a theme that we have a lot in this committee. Okay. And you'll see that there are other examples of that. And as I said, it was reviewed in the Banking Committee. Due to the double referral and no time, it couldn't be added there. So it is not an issue that normally would come to this committee, but this was the first place that we could put it in.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to bring that up. It just got handed to me just now, and I wanted to make sure I understood it, because I am very much in support of your bill, but I wanted to make sure that was something we would still support.
No worries, Madam Vice Chair. It was just handed to me as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Any other support? Members or people in support?
Casey Elliott on behalf of the California Association for Microenterprise Opportunity. We're in support.
Thank you, sir.
Yolanda Benson, representing the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, in support of the bill. And we want to thank the committee and the chair. They've been holding these small business meetings where literally there have been 50 to 80 people in the room. That really brings the whole network, that brings small business interests together to really ensure that as the money comes from the feds and as programs are implemented, including the CalCap program at the Treasurer's Office, that all the hurdles are removed, and we really are looking through with the fine-tooth comb to try and make sure that we have access to capital as businesses.
Thank you, Ms. Yolanda. Any other members in support or individuals in support? Any in opposition? Mr. Block moves the bill. Mr. Bell seconds it. Any other comments from the committee? Mr. Chair, would you like to close?
Respectfully ask for a aye vote.
Tony, can you call the roll?
Chairman Pettis?
Aye.
Vice Chair Grove?
Aye.
Aye, Grove. Mr. Bell? Aye, Mr. Bell. Mr. Block? Aye, Mr. Block. Mr. Hueso? Aye, Mr. Hueso. Mr. Morrell?
Aye, with just a caution on the underwriting guidelines. Could not be rested.
Okay. Take a look at that.
Aye, Mr. Rao.
The bill is out, Mr. Chair. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Is it okay to begin, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Wesso. It's item 9, I believe. AB 981.
Yes, thank you. And again, this is some work to expand the California Capital Access Program, the very, very successful California Capital Access Program. This is expanding it to lend for businesses that are in underserved areas. This expands the criteria to capture more businesses that normally wouldn't qualify for a conventional loan. We'll use stimulus money, about $84 million, to increase or to cover the potential losses. A very important component of this bill makes the ability to keep this program going through a modification in the lending criteria, so that it makes the program sustainable, and that's the most critical component of this bill. This bill went to Banking and Finance and got unanimous support from all members, bipartisan support. It's a good finance bill. It's a good jobs bill. It's a good economic development bill, and it's a really good small business bill. This is getting to lending for small business. 95% of the people in our state work for a small business. If we can make small business more successful in the state, we will basically eliminate our unemployment rate. So anything that we can do to help small business in the state will go a long way to creating a more vibrant economy, a more healthy economy, and a more healthy place for Californians to live. So I respectfully request an aye vote.
Well, thank you, Mr. West. Do you have anyone here in support?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Diane Stanton on behalf of State Treasurer Bill Lockyer. We are the sponsor of the bill. And these three technical changes we see as making the state and the federal dollars and those two programs congruent. And I'm happy to answer any technical questions.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of the measure? Anyone in opposition? Any questions or thoughts from members? There's a first and a second. Okay, good. Madam Vice Chair, no thoughts?
Mr. Hueso, I'm honored to support your bill. We found common ground. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing this bill forth, Mr. Wessel, and I look forward to working with you on this program as well as we move these bills forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, go ahead and call the roll.
Vimael Perez.
Aye.
Aye. Grove. Aye. Bell. Aye. Block. Aye. Wessel.
Aye.
Aye. Morrell. Aye. 6-0.
Thank you. Your bill is out, and I do believe we have two bills on call. Madam Secretary, AB 696.
The vote is 3-2. Block. Aye. Bill is out. 4-2.
Bill is out, Mr. Wessel, and AB 893.
The vote is 3-1. Block. Aye. Bill is out. 4-1.
Thank you. And it seems like we're done with our agenda for today. And I want to thank all of you for being here in attendance, and I want to thank the members as well. I think overall there were some great points made, and I still believe that this committee here is one of the only committees that tends to gain bipartisan support on many measures. So we'll continue to work hard as we move forward, and I just want to thank all of you for your good work.
Mr. Chair, you did hold the roll open on 1094.
That's right. So Mr. Morel's...
Morel? No. That is 4-2.
Bill is out. Okay, good. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.